Welcome to another episode of We Don't Die. I'm your host, Sandra Champlain, author of the international best-selling book called We Don't Die: A Skeptic's Discovery of Life After Death. And just a reminder, my home base is wedon'tdie.com, where you can always find great things like classes, our free Sunday gathering with medium demonstration included. And if you'd like a complimentary copy of my book, just enter your name and email address at the bottom of the page. Chapter 10 is how to survive grief, and there's a lot of important things in there. So that's all at wedon'tdie.com. Our guest today is Lance Dorrel, who was brought up on stories and movies of the Old West, which sparked a lifelong passion to learn everything he could about Native American history of the United States. That passion is now his 20-year labor of love, leading him as a historian and ethnographer, traveling the American West to learn customs and ways directly from Native American tribes. He's the author of two deeply researched books, A Dance with Death, An Irish Soldier of Fortune at the Little Bighorn, and his powerful book, The History They Tell, Oral History from Native American and First Nations People regarding the Battle of Little Bighorn. His work provides a rare window into a worldview where spirituality is woven into the very fabric of everyday life. We'll talk about what these traditions teach us about the journey of our soul, communication with our ancestors, and what it truly means to walk a path of sacredness in this world and the next. You can find out more information about Lance on his website, lancejdorrel.com. Lance, a warm, warm welcome to you to We Don't Die.
Thank you, Sandra. Great to be here. I appreciate it.
I'm super thrilled. This is a conversation we've never had. And I think it's wonderful, just the research that you've done. And I know it's a whole lot more than just spirituality, but if you wouldn't mind, tell us where you are. Tell us a little bit about your backstory that got you interested in this world.
Sure. So I'm very fortunate. My wife and I, we live out in what is West Central Missouri right now with a house full of animals that keep us busy. So, and then I work a full-time job as a community liaison for a company out here. So that keeps me busy. But in my spare time, I try to get out west still and do as much research as I can. But to answer your question, what got me started, I was very fortunate. I had a mother and a maternal grandmother who instilled in us to read, go to the library, encourage that journey. And but then the ultimate part of me was my mother's two brothers were very outdoors types of guys. Took us to the farm, made us go rock hunting with them, and then they instilled a deep sense of studying the Native American people. And again, the reading, the curiosity was always there. And so it was an easy transition for me. But as you go to that transition in life, you go to college, you're taught to get a job, right? To get in line, step in line, and all those things. And it never left my psyche, but I was always reading, trying to understand what happened. In the late 90s, I started kind of really getting more into it. I had a job where I could travel out west a little bit here and there, but it really wasn't until around 2010 that the trajectory happened for me, so to speak. And I'm sure you can relate to, sometimes you have to go find those things and put it out there, manifest it, make it happen, right? But there's no shortage of people that came into my orbit, so to speak, that helped me immensely, or none of this would have none of this would have happened. The research, the meeting, the people, and so a lot of this centered around the battlefield out the Montana, the Little Bighorn, and so I got to meet a gentleman by the name of James Putt Thompson, who's right out of Central Casting. Okay, uh, he belongs in an old Western like John Ford, but he and his family are the proprietors of the Custer Battlefield Trading Post, of all places. And this is a establishment that's right across from the entrance to the National Battlefield, okay, ran by the National Park Service. And he and his family have a restaurant, a very good gift shop, and of course a museum. But it's this melting pot of travelers from all over the world, Sandra, that stop in there and visit. And he has this porch. You go in, creeks. It's like a stagecoach stop from you know, an old western, but it's much bigger than that. And he's quite a collector. He is a very extensive collection of Native American stuff and other Great West. And eventually, I'd known this man for a number of years. I would go to the battlefield and kind of little Bighorn battlefield. I'd come out of there kind of discouraged, have to go back to the world and work, right. And he finally kind of pulled me to the side. He said, "Look, if you really want to get to know what happened over there," pointing at the battlefield, he said, "you've really got to get to know more Native American people." And I said, "Putt, that's great, but you know, I'm only out here a couple of weeks at a time. Got to go back to the world and work." And he said, "Well, let me see what I can do." So the next year, I talked to him on the phone. He helped me meet 4 Northern Cheyenne elders. 2 are still with us to this day. 2 have made their journey, and they were instrumental in helping me get on the path to meet other, not only Northern Cheyenne folks, but many other Native American people. So I owe a great deal of debt to James Putt Thompson, his family, for putting up with me, and of course, then those 4 elders that I got to meet on this journey.
Incredible. And I think we all know it's just a devastating loss experienced by the Native Americans here in our country, just beyond words can ever describe.
Mm-hmm.
When you started investigating, I know you wrote a first book. Could you tell us a little bit about that before we get into the spirituality and, um, yeah, just maybe some of the core themes that these elders brought forth to you? Because, yeah, my heart goes out. I know I'm a small part Native American, a
Right.
tribe here in Rhode Island, but I don't
Mm-hmm.
know the history.
Yeah. Well, so on my first book, it dealt with an Irish soldier of fortune, Miles Keogh, and this is a story that almost sounds at times too fascinating for one guy's life in 36 years, right? This was a man who grew up in Ireland. He his family did not really suffer during the Great Famine, but he had a yearning to be a soldier, was brought up on the classics, Charles Lever's, O'Malley's, the Irish Dragoon. And so he had it instilled in himself that he was going to be a soldier. He went to a parochial school, went to a little bit of college, but along came a calling from the Pope in 1860, and he was asking for young men who were Catholic to come and defend the Papal States in Italy, because Italy as a country was unifying, and that was a direct threat to the Catholic Church. So young men all across Europe heeded the call. Many of them had always wanted to be a soldier, and so here's your chance. They had no help. They had to get to Rome on their own. And so the Miles Keogh leaves Ireland, runs into some fellow Irish guys. They travel, they get there, and they get involved in what's called the Papal Wars. And how any of them survived and didn't die of dysentery and other diseases along this very short-lived war is amazing in itself. But along at that time, the Union Army was catching wind of this as the Civil War is kicking off in the United States. So they sent emissaries. They were looking for officers. So what they would do is recruit. So Keogh and his 2 best friends, O'Keefe and gosh, I'm drawing a blank. It's been so long, Sandra. Sorry,
It's
but anyway,
okay.
these men leave one more as the Papal army was surrendered. He didn't want, he wanted to stay as a soldier. These guys threw caution to the wind with their documentation in hand. They sail for America as commissioned officers in the Union Army for the Civil War. Can you imagine? I mean, just fearless. And again, this man's 21 years old. I mean, when a lot of us are 21, we're struggling to get to college, work a part-time job. Nowadays, it might be a little bit different, but I'm dating myself there. But anyway, so he and his friends, O'Keefe, and again, I cannot remember the other man's name. Sorry. They come to America, and immediately are just joining the carnage as newly commissioned officers in the war. Miles Keogh will fight at Antietam, Brandywine Station, of course, Gettysburg, and he's with the units, John Buford's cavalry, that get to Gettysburg before the Confederates do. And these cavalry units will set up and buy time for the massive amount of infantry to get there. And, I don't want to portray myself as any type of Civil War historian, but I feel confident in saying that if it's not for these cavalrymen of John Buford buying time for the rest of them to get there, uh, a little place called Gettysburg is a very different story. We might have a different conversation about our history. He survived there. Get this one, Sandra. He then goes with Sherman's army as they go into the South to, burn Atlanta, so to speak. On the way, they were going to liberate their thousands and thousands of Union soldiers at the notorious Andersonville prison camp. Many of those thousands and thousands of those men had been already died in atrocious situation. And as he and his group that had split off to go after Andersonville, they got themselves captured. He got malaria, survived in a prisoner of war camp in South Carolina, was freed, and didn't want to go back to Europe. And again, he had a family to go home to, Sandra, but he wanted to stay as a soldier of fortune. He joined the newly formed 7th Cavalry with George Armstrong Custer and rode into fame and immortality at a place called the Little Bighorn. What makes Miles Keogh's story incredible is his war horse, Comanche, survived the battle of the Little Bighorn, and a lot has been made to do about Comanche. Comanche lived for another 14 years and died in 1890, kind of keeping Miles Keogh and his spirit de corps, his this attitude of being the wild geese, that came from Ireland to fight as soldiers of fortunes. But that's Miles Keogh. But in that world that I was in at that time, I started meeting many, many elders, to kind of get back to your question sorry. So that's where I started meeting Native American elders. And at that time that I met Donovan Taylor. Donovan is a Northern Cheyenne historian, okay? And we had always had a fascination, both of us, to work and do our best to save oral history, what was left of the Battle of the Little Bighorn. So that's where all this kind of meshes and comes together, okay? And so I had met Donovan through the 4 Northern Cheyenne elders that I met, and Donovan and I decided, let's try to capture this oral history before it's gone. So that's what we set out to do over an 8-year period. And so our friendship runs deep. He adopted me as his brother. I'm honored to call him my brother. And we just set out to visit with as many people as we can about this battle. And of course, I had at that time many connections with Lakota folks in South Dakota, but there's a protocol and a procedure to go about asking for information. And I'm talking about on a very rudimentary level, okay? And so we made sure that we adhered to all of those as best we could, depending on the individual and their tribe, their beliefs, and how they felt we should go with this. And again, we're trying to stay old school but modern times, right? Because a lot of the interviews were done like what you and I are doing. So, for instance, it may be as simple as sending tobacco ahead of the time. Okay. And that's just a snapshot. But so what we set out to do was visit as many people as we could face to face. But of course, sometimes the phone and Zoom, and it just snowballed on us. We had no idea that we would run into these many people. And we got so very, very fortunate to catch glimpses of this history to one of history's greatest mysteries, the Battle of the Little Bighorn. Okay. And we couldn't keep up. But, both of us have full-time jobs. We have families. And we were doing our best to keep up with, try to capture this history. And Donovan was teaching me along the way. So were the elders about a lot of things, not just the battle related. And what was opening my eyes and opening my heart was literally I was understanding really who the Native and First Nations people that are in Canada really were as a people. Because you can read all the books you want. That's a great resource, okay? But the bottom line was I was woefully and still am inadequate when it comes to a lot of the aspects and nuances just who the people were and are. And so this journey then starts morphing into my own journey, but I don't want to make it my own journey, but it is of growing and understanding the whole concept of spirituality. But it's more than that, Sandra. It's about these folks and what they used to be able to do, and how we as a society destroyed them, subjugated them, and we could have learned so much from them. So it's a lesson to be learned, but I'm the luckiest guy walking to have been able to get on this journey.
I bet. Yeah, there's so much that is in the history books, even the that nice story of Thanksgiving that we
Uh,
celebrate. Ah, it
yeah,
didn't happen that way.
no.
No. So when did the seed get planted within you that you need another book? The history they tell.
Well, when we're on this journey, probably 3 years into it, what I would get out west to Montana where Donovan lives, and he lives very near the battlefield. And we just were interviewing many, many folks, taking their stories down. We just said, let's do this before it's too late. And again, it's kind of like, this. Once you decide to do things, the world has a way of getting behind you. And we just did it. And it took a long, that took 6 years to really get it to information, so to speak. But what was happening was a lot of these stories about the little bighorn carried forth back into ancient times. So, for instance, one of the overriding arching themes is, and I try to talk about this in the book with not taking too much away from the little bighorn battle because we wanted that history out, is Native American and First Nations people from Canada all still believe that they were all one at one time on this continent, on Turtle Island. Okay. And if you let that sink in, it opens your eyes to many other things that you'll come across, not only listening from oral stories, but when you go back and read a lot of accounts, in whatever type of book, doesn't pertain to the little bighorn. But when you have that in your head and you start to read the firsthand accounts that Native people gave to ethnographers and historians, you start to see things much different. So once I had my heart opened up, my eyes opened up and my ears opened, so to speak, and it was like a whole nother world for me to understand the ancient history to this continent.
You
Okay.
mean Turtle Island being the earth and all people are connected? Is that what you meant?
We'll stay in the Western Hemisphere,
Okay.
North America and South America, or Central America and then South America. Yeah. But I mean, yeah, we'll just stay on there. But Turtle Island, yeah, we'll say that for right. It is the Western Hemisphere and that all were related. Okay. And so at the same time that all this little bighorn information is coming, then other pieces of that start to fall in place. So all were one at one time. And I'm very, very, I'm the type of guy that I'm very curious. I was wanting to hear these stories. When I was going to out west as much as I could to where the reservations or other places to meet folks, a lot of stories were starting to be told to me and Donovan, but the stories were very, very similar, very similar. And we want to be careful to lump Native people or First Nations people by linguistics because there's many, many different linguistic stocks. But we want to be careful there because what I found was at one time in the quote history book, a tribe was said to be a Siouan speaking people, but later on they're Algonquin. Okay. And just for some clarity, the Algonquins are always thought to be in your neck of the woods out east. Okay. So you might think of the Mohican, uh, the Narragansett, the Lenape. Okay. that whole part of the northeast of the United States would be Algonquin territory. Okay. What I couldn't understand was why nobody was investigating that at the Little Bighorn. And what I mean is, at the Little Bighorn, we have Cheyenne and Arapaho, and of course, Sioux and speaking people. Our research was showing that there was a great deal of Algonquin people at the Little Bighorn that were there that it's not in the historical record. Okay. And these folks, these oral histories were coming to us from Blackfeet people, Gros Ventre people, Cree, Ojibwe. And that was just, that's never been talked about. There's snippets of it in the historical record, but so that's kind of there as well. But we were really trying to catch this part of it, and so it didn't make sense. Why are these Algonquins here? Why is nobody talking about them? And they're always said to have migrated from the East Coast to the West Coast. Okay, well, our research was telling us a much different story, that they actually migrated from the West Coast to the East Coast and were coming back and forth. So that's just the world we stepped in on that part of it. Okay, pretty wild.
It is pretty wild. What did you find out similarities as far as spirituality? We have listeners and viewers here
Mm.
coming in for belief in the afterlife and looking for evidence, but we've never dabbled upon um, what these people thought. And I know tribes are different and such, but there's, I'm sure, it's some similarities that you found.
Let me shut this door. Sorry. So I'm glad you asked that, because we tried to bring that out in the book a little bit about these long held beliefs that have been completely ignored from the Native American perspective. And it wasn't, spirituality is not a religion, it's a way of life. And in everything. The earth is a sentient being that we're lucky enough to be a part of. And that involves the trees, the insects, the grass. It's all a sentient being. Okay. And that's why we talk about grounding yourself, sitting outside in your bare feet, and letting Mother Earth heal you and communicate with you. So that's an aspect that was opened up to me. The other important part about this is, and again, I was trying to put this in the book without taking away from the Little Bighorn, the battle. But the elders had asked me to put this stuff out there. And it's invaluable for anybody who wants to take a journey of spirituality, or seekers and searchers. But the people of this Turtle Island had abilities, Sandra, that they could communicate with the spirit world. Okay. Now, not everybody could do it as well as the next person. There were people that were clearly imbued with this ability and honed it as they went on their journey of life. Okay. And so those people were looked at to lead others. And you don't want to say, again, a religious leader. You don't want to say a medicine man or a medicine woman. That can be applied as, apothecarians, people who healed with herbs and plants and other medicinal remedies. Algonquin people might call them shamans. Okay. And let me be the first to say this: shamans and shamanism gets thrown out there way too much. Okay. Uh, I can just speak from what I know, but hold on here. Something popped up. It says Zoom is not responding.
I can see you and I can hear you.
Okay. Um, so what happened when you say shamanism, Sandra? It's that should be applied to people that come from a certain area of Siberia. Okay. Henceforth, that's my beautiful wife. Thank you.
I love the delivery service. For those of you who are listening, as
I'm
wife
spoiled
just
rotten.
brought him a beverage.
Yes. So uh, the shamanism, we have to. I want to make this clear. It should be applied to people from Siberia Mongolia, and Russia in that area. Okay. Sandra, that's the area that the Algonquins came into North America from. Okay. So what I'm trying to paint a picture here, and I'm not doing very well, so I'm sorry. It's those people had came into the Bering Land Bridge. Yes, the Bering Land Bridge theory does apply to Algonquin people and Dene people, the Apaches, Navajo. Uh, and so these people came across the Bering Land Bridge, Yukon Territory, down through Western Canada, and into the United States. Again, Canada and the United States aren't, this is thousands and thousands of years ago, but these people had very distinct abilities, they're shamans, to communicate with the spirit world. They used the spirit world, so to speak, to guide them. Okay. This isn't a haphazard, willy-nilly journey that you and I take off on and got GPS. Okay. We're talking about thousands of people, depending on their leaders, which are spiritual men and women in some cases, to navigate with them into this new world that had been prophesied to them. They came out of Siberia, Mongolia, Russia, islands north of Japan, that can be phonetically proven and through mitochondrial DNA. Okay. If you don't, people don't want to take my word for it, that's fine. Do your own research. It's pretty easy to find some of this stuff out. Where this collides with the little bighorn is these Algonquin people have a history that's so far back, Sandra, that it's mind blowing. And they come across the United States in the Pacific Northwest. When they get in there, they meet people who are already here. So that starts to blow out this ancient theory that the native people only got here at a certain time. No, they were always here. The native people have always been here. We don't know who the first peopling of North America is. Don't let anybody tell you, okay? We've got a pretty good idea on the second, third, and fourth, okay? But what I'm trying to articulate here is when these Algonquins get here, the second peoplings are already here. And one of the groups that they encounter in the Pacific Northwest are people who are said to be great sorcerers. And so they have a protracted battle with these people. The years go on. Some of these Algonquin people go down to the West Coast, Southern Oregon, and into Northern California, and they're still here today. But we've never been able to explain why there's two Algonquin tribes in Northern California. And now the reason I bring that up to you and your listeners is, and this is mind blowing, is that one of these tribes, the Yurok and the Wyots, I forget which one, has ancient history that says when they got here, there was a race of white people already here. And that these white people they got along, they treated them well, they learned from each other. And then one day, lo and behold, the white race has to leave, says their goodbyes, and says, we're going back to where we came from. And the Wyots and Yurots ask them, where are you going? And they tell them, and it's the same place that the Wyots and Yurots, the Algonquins, had come from. So you mean there's all of this ancient history here, okay? And to wrap this up on the Algonquins, these Algonquins traversed Canada and what becomes the United States, and they break off and hive off, as you know, because of resources, right? They have to have food for thousands of these people, and they're led by different leaders. But what is very interesting about this is when they get down in my neck of the woods of Missouri, they start to have some troubles with some folks that are already here. Okay. And these folks who are already here, the Algonquins will call them the snakes. Okay. Well, we know that the snakes are people who had come up from Mesoamerica and Central America and South America. But the history books and other folks don't want that out there. They don't want that known. Okay. And then what happens is when they get around Cahokia, which is on Western Illinois, on the east side of St. Louis, they will smash into these snakes and have this protracted war through the Midwest and Southeast that goes on for centuries until they get out to your neck of the woods. But the driving force of this is their shamans and their spirituality and their beliefs in this afterlife and the help from above. So that's where this all collides, and that's the world I walked into. I
It's
had
an
no idea. I had no idea what I was
incredible.
walking into.
My goodness. I don't know if this is true, but somewhere in my reference banks, I would hear stories that they would meet at certain times of the year. And of course, nobody had a GPS and nobody had a clock and all that. They just knew. And the people would use their abilities, whether they're being in touch with the spirit world or their soul or whatever. And what I'm speaking of is that we all have this innate instinct and connection that I think lays dormant in us because we don't know we have it.
Yes, I found that out to be exactly true on this journey. I'm glad you brought it up because I feel like I'm a broken record trying to put that out there. And we tried to again incorporate some of this in the book, namely chapters 8 and 12, about the people's abilities that are now actually coming to forelight in what I call this disclosure movement that's sweeping the world. Okay. And I hate to say UFO, UAP, but that's an umbrella term on this disclosure movement that has been covered up from us as human beings by our government for a long, long time, right? I understand how it was covered up at first for national security. Okay, after because we just won World War II, we had a lot of things going on with the Cold War popping off, and certain gifts were being given by star travelers. We'll leave it at that. And if I was Harry Truman and his generals and his advisors, how do you go on TV or the national radio and say, we just won, my fellow Americans, we just won World War II. We're going to have some issues with Joe Stalin and the Russians. Don't worry, we got it. We got those nuclear bombs. We got a few of them, right? They're all in one place in Roswell, New Mexico, by the way, 5 of them. But we can't control the airspace out there because there's craft flying around that our jets can't keep up with. And by the way, over the 4th of July weekend, so a couple of things went down out there. But we got this. You can't do that. You can't. I mean, it would have sent us in a tailspin, and not to mention it tells your enemies what you have. Okay. Well, Roswell is a long time ago, Sandra, and it's time that these things start coming out. That's just a snapshot. I mean, a snapshot. But the point being is with the native people, their ability to remote view, to telepathically communicate with one another, was made explicitly known to me on my journey. And it's explicitly important to the little Bighorn because the people there had those abilities. And they used those abilities to keep track of their enemies, as they had done for thousands and thousands of years, all across the United States, whatever they were doing. Okay. Because when people were traveling, whether it was a war party or just traveling or moving the band and the tribe, they're they're spiritual people. And again, you don't want to say medicinal people, but they're lumped as medicine men. They led the bands as they moved. No war party, Sandra, went out without one of these people in it. Okay. They had a ways to communicate, and they also communicated through the winged creatures, the animals. So they're in a sense their eyes, their ears. They're in a sense their scouts. But they were also able to remote view, go into ceremonies where they could communicate with the spirit world. I'm trying to be a little bit careful here with this, and foresee in the future where the enemies were, how many were there, what obstacles they had to overcome, also on this journey, and the winged creatures, the two-legged creatures were all at their disposal. They were all one together. Okay, and they were able to tune into that world. They were also able to tune into this world of understanding the landscape of the world that they traveled in. And here's one that's very, very fascinating, is that when I'm talking about everybody was one at one time, there wasn't this protracted warfare. Yeah, there was warfare when they came into the country over resources, but those things seem to settle down. And we're working with a group of Native people that we taught. There is a truce that was called, so to speak, thousands of years ago between the northern people and the southern people. And that's pretty wild in itself to think about this, that this happened thousands of years ago, and Native people in North America and those in Central and South America talk about this truce. And it was between the eagle and the condor. Okay. And to tie this up for you for now is, if the people of Turtle Island are to return as medicinal people, and that includes people of all races, you and me, if we are to be able to possibly learn those skills to telepathically communicate, to live in a more spiritual life, the eagle and the condor have to be reunited. And so there's prophecies that talk about this, and this is what these folks are kind of working on to this day. So I'm just along for the ride. There's not a lot more I can say about that part of it, but I hope I'm able to give you an accurate snapshot of that, what you're looking for, because that's the world that I fell into. So I'm opening my door here. My dog's not happy, so bear with me.
Okay. I'll say a few words while you're opening the door for the dog. What's the dog's name?
Jack, this is Jack.
Hi, Jack. Oh, you have to say something so the camera's on you when you see Jack.
Yes.
Beautiful white dog.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
Sorry about the interruption.
I don't mind. I don't mind at all. I wanted to tell you, I've done my own training in remote viewing, and it's mind-blowing what we can pick up that we think is just our imagination, also doing some psychic and mediumistic work. And we human beings, I think it's easy to just chalk that up to our imagination, but we have so much intuition and instinct if we would only slow down. What were their beliefs, or are there beliefs as far as afterlife?
Mm-hmm. It's simple. This is a journey. You're just going to the next journey. It's as simple as that. There's a lot to it. You wanted to be a good human being to go to that next journey, because if you were not a good human being on this journey, you may have trouble getting to the next journey where your relatives were and so forth. Okay. And you got to remember, and this part gets overlooked extensively, the majority of the tribes, when you dig into the research and visit, but sadly, many of their people today don't know this, their stories are they came from the stars. The stars, they came from the stars. Okay. And there's certain, I don't want to say taboos, there's certain protocols and procedures that many people follow. I'm not going to discuss those, that let them know and let other tribes know back in the day that where they came from in the stars, and that was by certain paints and colors of paints. And the one that I can share with you deals out in your neck of the woods with Algonquin people and Algonquin people out west, and it's on a very just on the top level of it was red paint. Okay, you can do some red. There's a lot of old videos on YouTube about people in Nova Scotia and in your neck of the woods, and they adhered to "We are the red paint people," people of the red paint. So I'll give your listeners some homework to do. You can find those videos on YouTube, but that distinguished where they came from in the stars and their connection to the star people, their star relatives, their star beings, and where they were going to go back to when they made their journey, and how they had to be painted for ceremonial purposes to make that journey. So they come from the stars, and there's ancient ceremonies that to this day, again, sadly, many native people don't even know about, that directly come from the star people. For instance, the famous sweat lodge,
Right?
that's directly from star people. Okay. But it's been so corrupted and changed to accommodate co- commercialism. And unfortunately, there's been a lot of nefarious acts done with it. But the sweat lodge was to communicate with the star people. Women were not in it at that time. They brought the stones. It was a cleansing ceremony for the men to visit with the star people. The women already had been cleansed through the menstrual cycle. And we can go on those. And I'm probably not the guy to really ask sometime about all of those. I'm just on the peripheral level, but I know enough to have an articulate conversation with you and understand that. So when you put that in perspective, all were one, all came from the stars. Things start to change for you on this journey, and you might say you start to experience some ontological shock when you get into a little bit deeper, because there were a lot of ceremonies that had been recorded by the trappers, the voyagers, that when they came into as they got into further and further to North America, that they would go with the native people. They might be an emissary, they might be a trapper, a trader, and they talk about a lot of these ceremonies, like the shaking tent ceremony and so forth and so forth, that it's pretty mind-boggling and mind-blowing. But I can tell you that the folks today still adhere to this way of life. They still go to these ceremonies. They're still ceremoniously strong. They have their beliefs, and they walk in that spirituality. Even though there's all of these things tugging at them, that's tugging at you and me. You have to have a home. You have to work, right? We can go on, right? But unfortunately, we're a capitalistic society, and so there's a lot of things that pull on you from getting you off the journey. But traditional people still adhere and do their best to keep their family in that world. But it's not easy.
No. So we have our journey here. There's a journey in the afterlife. Do they believe that our ancestors can communicate with us?
Hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And much of the journey centers around, um, for a lot of tribes going back, I'll just leave it as the Milky Way. Okay. And that, but again, you had to live a good journey on this part of the journey to get there. Okay. If not, you may not make it there this time. You may have to come back here, or you may go to another place, so to speak, and not have an easy journey there. So yeah, you got that. That's the same context in a lot of ways. Yes.
This is a good message for all, no matter what lies
Right.
beyond.
Well, I mean,
Be a
let's
good
think about
person.
it. These are ancient people that have been here, that are walking in spirituality as a way of life. So we should probably pay attention to what they're saying about moving on. But you are judged, right? There's a creator. You are judged.
Thank you for that. Can we go
You
back to
bet.
animals just for a moment? I've heard the phrase totem animal, those kind of things.
Mm.
Did they believe in the wisdom of the animals and that the different animals could teach us different things? Like
Absolutely.
current
There's
day shamans say? I know what you mean about shamans. Everybody's a shaman. You can take a weekend course, be a shaman, shaman, shaman. But that's
yeah.
one of the things they say. Somebody told me my totem animal is the wolf. I'm like, okay.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, totemism, I think that's how they say it. That's a whole aspect. We wouldn't even, that'd be a whole nother show. And I'm woefully inadequate for that. I'd have to find somebody to help you with that. But going back to animals, okay, so the winged creatures were very important to native people because they used them as a scout. Think about your drone. So how could they tap into that ability to see through that winged creature? That's pretty remarkable. Okay. And don't kid yourself, the United States government and the Canadian government was after that stuff, after those powers. And that was a direct collision course part of the Little Bighorn. Okay. Because the when you talk to elders to this day, and you know, there's always critics about revisionism, and stories now aren't the same as they were back then. And you know, everybody has a right to their opinion. Everybody has a right to an educated opinion. But those are two different things. Saying something when you don't know, and saying something if you're educated, I'm going to listen to the educated person. Okay. What I'm getting at here is Native people and First Nations people have worked very hard to keep oral history alive, despite what people say today. Okay. I'm not going to hear that. I'm not going to hear it because I've witnessed it for 20 years. Okay. And part of that oral history is at the Little Bighorn, those abilities that the people had was being chased, compromised, whatever, however you want to say it. And people say, well, how do they know that they had those powers? Well, pretty easy. The United States government had massacred thousands of their kinsmen, taken thousands of their kinsmen prisoners, put them in Leavenworth, Kansas, tortured them, and wanted to know who are the ones who could change the weather, who could harness the weather, who could shoot lightning. I mean, very rudimentary stuff, but people, and let's put ourselves in that. Uh, let's pretend, Sandra, that you're part of a tribe. Your wife and children have been abused. You're going to tell them whatever they want to hear. You're going to tell them even secrets. And so they knew a lot of these things. And you had traders who were called half breeds. I hate saying that term, but that's what it is. Who were married into the tribe, who wanted to keep their jobs and get better jobs in the federal government system on the reservations as traders and agents. And so they helped them. It's military intelligence 101. They're finding assets, taking those assets, trying to find where the people would gather in the summers, what abilities they might have. Not everybody, again, had these abilities to communicate with animals. Some people could possibly change their form and the proverbial shapeshifter. Okay. That's in play with these people. Again, that's a whole nother realm. I'm not qualified to sit here and have an articulate conversation with you. I can give you the peripheral edge that people can do it and did do it. And it was on display at the Little Bighorn. And what I'm saying to you is at the Little Bighorn, the story still is today for the tribes is that battle was for their right to pray. Okay.
Wow.
For their right to be spiritual people. The government wanted that gone. You eradicate that by destroying the food source, the buffalo. The second thing they had to eradicate to subject these people forever, which they've never been able to do, is break their spirituality. They were after that at the Little Bighorn. And I tried my darndest to put that in that book, slide it in, put it in best I could. But again, without taking away from the oral history directly related to the battle. But the two collided. And what I did is I was always going back and checking the historical record based on what was being told to me. And, you know, lo and behold, a lot of these other parts of it was already said, but had been completely ignored by ethnographers and historians. Other parts were brand new, but that spirituality and the power and the prowess of these people was on complete display that day. Okay. And what I'm saying to you is, while yes, the 7th Cavalry, led by their famous commander, George Armstrong Custer, about pulled it off. Credit to him, give credit where credit's due. He about subjugated these people because he went after the women and children, and he got dangerously close to them. And that's total warfare. But there's a whole nother thing about the battle, and mistakes were made, underestimating your enemy's strength. And they underestimated the people's resolve that day not to be taken. Youngsters fought, women fought, the elders fought. They were not going to be taken that day. Okay. And they had help. And one of the great oral stories that we included in the book is that George Custer divided his forces into four groups. He's hitting this massive encampment that's possibly 7,500 to 10,000 people strong, strung out possibly 2.5 miles on the river. And the first group that comes down the valley, Major Marcus Reno, he had about 140 some men, and that's augmented by Arikara scouts who are going to try to run off a massive pony herd. I mean, woefully inadequately prepared, woefully inadequately undermanned. Point being is the first defenders, Sandra, were medicinal people and youngsters. We bring that out in the book. That was told to us repeatedly by elders. And when I went into the historical documents, the deep dive, that had been said many times that has been completely ignored. Our book is the first one to bring that out, that it was the medicinal people, people who were healers, apothecarians, but people who were also in communication with the spirit world were the first defenders, because as Marcus Reno and his men hit them on the southern end of this massive encampment, they had many wounded warriors and horses there who 8 days before had fought the United States Army at the Battle of the Rosebud. And to doctor these men and horses, you have to be away from the main encampment, because you cannot do those ceremonies around women who are pregnant or on the menstrual cycle. So the apothecarians, the medicine people, and the healers, and those who visited with the spirit world were further away. But they had youngsters helping them, acolytes, so to speak. They are the first defenders until the warriors can get mounted and get up there. Okay. That's a fascinating thing to me that gets completely overlooked, and it goes right into this whole thing about spirituality. So they repel Marcus Reno. George Custer has 5 companies and 210 men, and he's about ready to ride into eternity. And he's trying to get around this massive encampment that he has not properly reconnoitered. He couldn't, because he was afraid he'd be discovered. But his scouts said, hey, we've been discovered. We got to attack during broad daylight. And he did. You don't want to do that. You want to hit that village from multiple angles in the morning. He was trying to. But anyway, the native people had no idea that George Custer's 300 feet above him, miles away on what is now the current Park Service road. And he's trying to maneuver to get a crossing to get to the women and children, because he knows they fled the village and are moving north. The story we were told is there was a massive demonstration of winged creatures that came out of nowhere, as Reno and his men have been driven across the river and are no longer a threat. He's lost 40% of his command. He's been driven up the bluffs. We'll take care of him later. There was a moment of lull in the action in this massive demonstration. Thousands and thousands of birds just swooped above the bluffs, up in the air. Magpies, meadowlarks, woodpeckers, hawks, eagles, ravens, crow. And they made such a demonstration, Sandra, and were so demonstrative. Thousands of them swooping, diving, calling all the native people in the village, and even those that are stop and look. And guess what they see? The blue soldiers, the glinting off the guns in the sun, and they know this battle is about ready to get heated up. And but much to the shock of the men and the warriors in the village, they now realize George Custer has a lot more courage than anybody, because he and those 5 companies are going after the women and children, and so they're able to start going after him. So the winged creatures on that day followed Custer and his men. And so when he divided his forces, hoping the rest of them that he had left a ways away, he's sending messages to come on to not the company that's been repulsed. He doesn't know they're repulsed, but he's got a pack train, extra ammunition with other men. He's told them to come on. So he's dropping some of his command along the bluffs. as he's trying to probe and get down by the river where the women and children and elders are. Okay. Well, the birds, the winged creatures, wherever the soldiers stopped off, Sandra, they stopped. And so they would stay above them. And so they're letting the native people know where they're at. And then they followed him down by the river. And again, George Custer almost pulled it off. He got dangerously, dangerously close to the women and children. And if it wasn't for a concentrated effort by Cheyenne people to repel him, I believe he probably would have gotten the women and children, and the little Bighorns different, because this is his tactic. This is what they did at the Washita and what is modern day Oklahoma. When he hit the Cheyennes and Arapahoes, you get women captives and children, and you put them up the front, and it pulls the warriors off. So that's a long story, but I believe it needed to be put in there for what you were asking.
Yeah, I appreciate that. We know that Christianity and some of the early barbaric things they did to poor Native Americans and the, you know, word of God, right? But it was just
Yeah.
barbaric. And to squash that natural abilities that we have. And I think all of us know, and this time in the world, there's something like over 90% of the people that believe in the afterlife and have had these little psychic experiences and things, that we actually have them. Now, Lance, you're entrusted with so much of this oral history. You did your best to put it in this book. How can we help share it? Obviously, we're going to have a lot of listeners and viewers to this. You
Mm-hmm.
said chapters 8 and 12 are more about the spirituality side. What message do you want to leave with everybody? Because I know that history books do not share the same story. And I
Right.
know that, again, going back to Thanksgiving, because the tribe my people were involved with the war and everything. It's different. It was romanticized,
Mm-hmm.
and not accurate.
Yeah.
What can we
Right.
do to help, and what's the message you want to leave?
Well, I appreciate you asking that. I do. And it means a great deal to me. We have to get away from this fallacy that the people who were here were savages and there was this protracted warfare. That is the farthest thing from the case. They were and are articulate, incredible human beings who had a sense of caring for each other and their, we'll say, band, tribal members. It's a big umbrella term that knew no bounds, no orphans, etc. Okay, uh, their whole sense was about their family and their family's well-being and their people's well-being. They walked in a world of spirituality and still do, that is not religion. They don't need anybody to tell them where to go and pray. It's about their journey. Okay, and spirituality is paramount. The other thing that I hope I can put this out there is that so much has been said about who was here. It is just inaccurate. And I'm just giving you a snapshot, okay? But again, we don't know who the first peopling of North America is. We can argue on the archaeological side of it and all whatever, but the people who got here between 300 and 600 AD clearly had come from Mesoamerica and South America, okay? And they can be lumped together as snake people, okay? And that can be a little bit derogatory. So I don't want the readers to take that. But if you're a student of the Bible, think about how the snake is prevalent in the Bible, and it's not bad. Okay, I mean, that they get switched around as the Bible was had its versions. Okay, but there's a direct correspondence, or correspondence. There's a direct link with those people and a lot of history that was said about the Bible. Okay. And that's a whole nother story. There's been a lot of great things that have been researched, but it gets covered up. So, as a reader who's open to a journey of spirituality and research, take a look at the Native American people, follow their journey, because what's in the historical record is not accurate. These people were not static. They moved around. They had come into this world from many different ways and different directions, but their abilities the government coveted And if they would have been more better treated, I shudder to think how we would all be living a better life spiritually, emotionally, and of course, not have a lot of these ailments that bother us to this day, but can be treated with what I would call homeopathic remedies. Okay. And that's a shame for us as a people. It's a how these people were persecuted. We want to focus on World War II. Well, let's step back and look at the genocide here. Look at the genocide in Africa. Okay, it's appalling. All in the name of what? Humanity? I that's a stretch. So these folks are still here, and I'll say this to you: they're still willing to help. That's the beauty of these people to this day, with what the crazy world that we live in and some of these prophecies. They're still waiting in the wings to help, and they have a capacity and compassion that is second to none. And they are here to visit about this history. And there's a lot more, Sandra, about the star maps, um, where they came from, that should be looked at as we go through this UAP transparency and hearings that I think are supposed to happen in September, about a lot of this information that's been withheld from us, again, what's been withheld from the whole world. And I'm not here to get a pound of flesh out of the US and Canadian governments about this. I'm just on a journey that's pretty well documented that this stuff has been covered up. I believe we as a people have a right to hear it. We are able to understand it. I know you can. And it's not going to change my journey with the Creator. Okay. Because if you go back and study a lot of these, I don't want to say sightings, but let's say interactions with people that are star people, there's a lot of information in there that possibly could help us understand a little bit more about the Creator and where we all come from. Okay. And again, this is a journey. This is a long journey that we're being kept from. It's high time that we shared the information. And look, to wrap this up, we're all on the same level now that the Native American people were. Okay. And what I mean is, we're being subjugated to a point where now we are being told what we can do, the herd mentality. And it's the same thing. The test run was done on those people. Okay. And if people find that to be a stretch, that's fine. Okay. I'm comfortable and I take full responsibility in my ability to assess that situation. Okay. But I'm telling you, Sandra, the test run was done on these people. And now that's the world that we're living in. And I hate that world that we're living in for our future generations. Okay. So I'll leave that at that for that.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, I'm not the same person I was 30 years ago. I thought
Right.
this was all ridiculous. That's why my book's called A Skeptic's Discovery of Life After Death. I wasn't open to it. But the older we get and the more we start looking for answers and we start tapping into our own abilities, whether or not we think we have them, but listening to that inner voice, stuff
Mm,
starts to unfold. So is there one truth out there for everybody? I don't think so. I think we all can find our own truth. And so our own journey is so important. Tell us your website, what we can find there, and just let us know the names of your books again for those
sure.
who are interested.
Well, yeah, thank you. So again, I'm looking above me because my beautiful wife had framed the books, so it gives me sometimes you draw a blank because you have this stuff in your head for so long, right? It's so bizarre, and I'm in no way, shape, or form trying to compare myself to Billy Joel. So let's be clear. But one time I was at this Billy Joel concert, and bless his heart, this was years ago in the early 90s, and he's still going strong. And he had to stop between songs, and he's sweating profusely and trying to get some water. But he had this massive book on his piano, and he's talking to the audience, 20,000 people, 50,000 people. And he says, "Hey, bear with me. I got to get the book open to the song." And you're like, "What?" He doesn't remember Allentown. He doesn't have Uptown Girl. And he said, he's been doing this so long that he still has to visually look at it, and then it just comes to him. And I thought, My God, what a genius, you know? But yet he was so open and forthright about it, of trying to his recall. And I thought, man, that's crazy. And again, I'm not trying to lump myself. Let's be clear, I'm not that. But so anyway, the first book is A Dance with Death, an Irish soldier of fortune at the Little Bighorn. And that's got the deal with Miles Keogh, soldier of fortune. Miles Keogh did die at the Little Bighorn, fighting with George Custer, highly decorated Civil War vet. And then, of course, his war horse was Comanche. And that is found on Amazon as well. You can just go to Lance J. Dorrel. And then Donovan Taylor and I released our book back in November, The History They Tell, and it's on Amazon as well. Again, Lance J. Dorrel. I have a website, lancej.dorrel.com, but I'll be completely honest with you and your listeners that I don't put really anything on there because I'm so busy, Sandra, with uh, working. My wife and I have a small animal orphanage here that takes up a lot of our time, and my wife works full time. I work full time as a community liaison, and so we're both. And then so I have a small window to do research, and just try to go about the daily things. So there's just not enough hours in the day to slice me. You know, you know how it is. I mean, you deal with it with your family, and you deal with it with our and aging parents, bless their hearts, and sometimes life gets in the way. So basically, I don't put anything on there. I'm on Facebook a little bit if it's something, but I just we are working to with a bunch of Native American folks. That kind of sounds kind of silly, but we are working with a good sized group of Native American and First Nations people to work on bringing some of this other history out. Okay, that's got to do with what I told you about that truce, and it has to do with the some ancient migrations and the peoplings of this country, the continent, so to speak. So we hope we can maybe get another book out in maybe 2 years, but I'd like to do that before. But that's basically where you find me in those ranks.
Well, thank you so much. And I love that you find a little time for your passion for family, caring for animals. This is what life looks like, and when we
Yeah.
can focus on making a difference for others. Well, Lance, we'll certainly do our part to keep the research going and share this because I think it's fascinating. And I think a lot of people are really interested in this. So thank you for your time today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to meet you, and best of luck to you. And my wife and I, we've been blessed with finding so many of these animals that have come to us. It's crazy. I don't know if there's a beacon on us or something, but I, I'm in fail in comparison to that beautiful individual that came in here. She's the glue and the linchpin. That woman has, and we don't like to say rescued because we believe that they have made us better people. So we'll just say rehabilitate or help them find homes, so to speak, because we have these two dogs here, bless their hearts. Jack that you saw, he's had it. He's had it. We belonged to him since 2014. And then we have another one named Freddie Joe, and we belonged to him since 2012. And we live on the edge of a town, and clearly people have been dumping these animals. Okay. And, in the world, like we talked about earlier, the Native American people would say that journey's going to be complicated for those that do that. We'll leave it at that. But the point being is, these animals, they're spiritual beings, okay, and they add so much more to all of us. And if I had one message to put out there, do your part. Help us, help us as a society. If you see us stray, rescue them, get them to a shelter, get them to somebody who can help them. Don't turn another blind eye. Get in the game, put the phone down, and let's be good human beings, because we're here for a very short time and we are being watched. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you, friend. Take care of yourself. Thank you so much for this.
You're welcome. And to our listener, this is some really good advice. And I think these animal companions can save us. We think we save them, but I've been saved by some animals myself and
Yeah.
found a place in my heart that I didn't even know that much love could exist.
Right.
So it's possible. So
Right.
a reminder to our listener, check out the books, A Dance with Death and The History They Tell. And
Right.
also my website, we-don't-die.com. Always some good things going on there. Of course, we've got our free Sunday gathering, inspirational, empowering service every Sunday, 2 o'clock New York time. It's on Zoom. Join 150 to 200 people all over the world. And the last half of it is a medium demonstration. So we get to witness just how close loved ones are. They're right by our sides. So I want to thank you for being here. My name is Sandra Champlain. It always gives me so much honor and empowerment to be your host here on We Don't Die. I do believe life is an education for our soul, and what we do here matters. We are so much more powerful than we think. If this episode ignited something in you, get a copy of Lance's book and check out chapters 8 and 12 in the
Right.
spirituality. Read the whole thing. But you are so much more than you think you are. You really, truly are. So I really want to thank you for listening or for watching, and we'll see you again soon.